yogis, welcome. This is an introduction to pranayama practices. Now just a little bit about the word pranayama. So prana is the life force. You might know this word as chi if you've ever looked at other systems or thoughts from the Eastern world. You might call it energy, you might call it vitality. It's kind of mysterious quality that makes it different or makes us alive. Now, prana is associated with the breath, and some people say prana rides on the breath or prana comes with the breath. Sometimes the word prana is used to describe the breath. We can go quite a few days without eating. We can go for a number of days without water. We can go even without sleep or some of the other kind of vital things that are necessary for us to have health. But we cannot go without the breath for very long at all. And so the breath is really considered the most vital aspect of our life force. And so pranayama, the word prana, breath, life force, energy, the word yama or ayama, depending on who is translating it, and maybe it's both, is manipulation, control, harnessing, modification of the breath. And so again, there's a lot of possible ways to define that. But what we're doing is we're doing practices that help us harness the power of our life force, that help us balance our life force, that help us energize ourselves when we need to be energized, calm ourselves when we need to calm. And ultimately what we're looking at really is we're talking about the mind. Okay? The goal of yoga, according to the Yoga Sutras, if that's the right word, goal may not be the right word, but we'll use it for now, is to calm or bring stillness to the fluctuating thought patterns of the mind. And so when our mind is constantly thinking about different things or jumping from thought to thought, we can't find that kind of inner stillness. And the inner stillness is the truth of who we are, right? So there's a lot of parts of our mind that are designed to kind of control our environment or manipulating our position in society. We might have like one face that we show to some people, like the people we have work with, and we might have a different face that we show our family. We might have different kind of personalities in different situations, and those are all fluctuations, right? They're part of the personality, but they're not part of the truth of who we are. So the truth lies somewhere in the center, somewhere in the calm stillness. And so the goal of all yoga practice is to try to find and abide in, rest in the stillness within, the witnessing part of our mind, our consciousness. So pranayama practices are practices designed to help us calm and find that presence of being. Now, there's lots of different kinds of pranayama practices. There are pranayama practices that energize us. There are pranayama practices that calm us down. And there are pranayama practices that are designed to kind of balance the two or bring us balance in between those two places. So all of the techniques of breathing or the techniques in these various pranayamas that I'm going to have here on my channel are, I'll tell you whether it's a warming breath, that's an energizing breath, or if it's meant to be cooling, which is another way to say calming, or if it's meant to be a balancing breath. And then you're gonna want to practice these on your own and really discern for yourself, like, does it work that way for me? When you first do a pranayama practice, you might find them a little bit awkward. You may not really grasp them at first. That's part of the process. And so what you might think about in terms of using pranayama is using it as a sort of entry into meditation. They're really fantastic practices, again, for bringing the mind into a place of stillness. And so, especially the thinking mind, or the intellect mind, bringing that into a place of stillness. They give us something to focus on, which is nice. And so it's a great way to begin a meditation practice, or to begin, in terms of like just do that first and then do meditation, or actually to use them to help you create a meditation practice in your life. So you can begin with some of these practices and then build your way into a meditation practice along the way. And you might always use pranayama practices to kind of help you begin your meditation each day, or you might use them now to start that, and then eventually some of these techniques may drop away as you find other ways or other patterns of meditation that work best for you. So that said, just to get into the technique of pranayama a little bit, pranayama or breathing practices have three parts. There's the inhalation, which is called puraka. There's the moment where the inhalation pauses, that's called kumbhaka, or holding. And then there's the exhalation, which is rachaka. And then there's a moment where that pauses, and that's kumbhaka. So the inhalation, the exhalation, and the pause are the parts of the breath. Now, we might do techniques that involve the inhalation, and then the exhalation happens on its own. We might do techniques that involve the exhalation, and the inhalation is allowed to happen on its own. Or we might do techniques that involve all of the parts, including lingering pauses or lingering kumbhaka. Now, just a word for health purposes. If you have conditions that involve the eye, like diabetic retinopathy, detached retina, glaucoma potentially, like anything that involves the back of the eye or pressure on the eye as a problem, then you are going to want to be very careful with breath retentions. In fact, you may want to not retain the breath at all, or if you do decide to practice that, be very short with your retentions and mindful of not gathering tension in the body, especially in the face or the back of the eye. The nervous system, particularly the parasympathetic nervous system, has cranial nerves that come out to the eyes and out to the facial muscles and to the muscles in the mouth that control salivation and a few other things. And so the parasympathetic nervous system is very intimately connected to how we manipulate the breath using the muscles of the face, the mouth, and the eyes. So be very cautious about not tensing up the face or tensing up the back of the eye or tensing up the mouth so that you are able to perform these pranayama practices without that undue tension. It's difficult at first, especially. You will find that you put a lot of tension around your face and maybe even in the throat. So try to find ways to keep these muscles relaxed while maintaining these different parts of the breath, the inhale, the exhale, and the kumbhaka. And again, if you have, or even high blood pressure can be an indication that you want to be very, very careful with kumbhaka, with holding of the breath. And you may decide not to hold the breath. Instead, inhale, like pay attention to that moment right as it's shifting over, just noticing it with your attention rather than actually holding the breath in those places. So as you begin to look at these different pranayama practices that are, I'm going to include in the other, in this portion of my YouTube channel, do use them with caution, try them, and then pause and notice how you feel. And then you might even make a little journal or take some notes so that you can keep track of how these different practices feel for you. And my suggestion to you is that you choose either a pranayama practice that feels the most comfortable for you to begin with, or that you choose one from each of the categories, cooling, balancing, warming, and that you work with just the one that is the most comfortable for you at first. And practice that pranayama practice or that grouping of pranayama practices over a period of time and with some regularity so that you become very familiar with them. Again, always maintaining a relaxed body, especially those muscles that are involved in the face, the eyes, the mouth, throat, so that you're not putting undue tension or pressure in your system. And if pranayama practices make you feel frayed or out of sorts, give them a rest for a while and try a different practice. Use the practices that feel the most comfortable to you, and over time that will shift and you'll try some of the others, and you might even wind up including a larger repertoire of pranayama practices in your practice. Now, the last thing I want to say in terms of pranayama practice of this introduction video is that pranayama is generally done separately from asana practice or yoga poses. There are exceptions to that rule, and I'll address some of those with the individual pranayama practices. But generally speaking, asana is designed to help balance and steady the body, and pranayama practices are to help balance and steady the mind. And that's not to say that they cannot be combined. It's just generally, it's easier if you can focus on the pranayama practices, especially the ones that are a little bit more complex. And so you might do them at the beginning of your yoga practice to help kind of still and quiet the mind. You might do them at the end of a yoga practice. And then just within the asana practice itself, there's a few that you might choose to use during the practice, but just being mindful that you'll want to make sure that you have a pause long enough if you do decide to include them in your asana practice or in your pose practice, that you give yourself time to really practice the pranayama and then move back into the asana. So you want to make sure that it's not something that you're trying to do while you're moving or flowing through different poses, all right? Give yourself time to really pay attention to how the pranayama works, how it makes you feel. These are subtle practices, and definitely an interesting practice to engage in. So good luck, yogis, and namaste.